U.S. Special Envoy for Climate John Kerry is in China to discuss an issue called an oasis in the often thorny China-U.S. relationship, climate change. He had a video call with Chinese State Councilor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi, who said major strategic miscalculations by the United States has resulted in deterioration in bilateral relations, and the U.S. should take concrete steps to improve them. Will the negotiations be fruitful and bring China-U.S. relations back on track? Or will the new trade war and now the Afghanistan mess cloud the talks? Joining me today are Madame Wu Changhua, Executive Director from Professional Association for China's Environment. She's currently based in Arlington, Virginia. And also we have with us Thomas Gehl, President of ChildWise International Corporation. He's currently in Chicago. Welcome to you both. Let me go to you, Director Wu. But before I do, I want to quote the Chinese State Councilor and Foreign Minister Wang Yi, who just held a video call with John Kerry on September the 1st, and Wang Yi said this: "The United States should stop viewing China as a threat and rival and cease containing and suppressing China all over the world. The U.S. should carry out coordination and cooperation at bilateral, regional, and global levels based on the principle of mutual respect, equality, and mutual benefit instead of one-way traffic." And this is interesting. Wang Yi also said that while the U.S. wants the climate change cooperation to be an oasis, it could be desertified if it is surrounded by deserts. Director Wu, do you think climate change cooperation can be an oasis in bilateral relations?
Well, the short answer is no, and that's imagined sort of a scenario or situation. I think we do need to understand the fundamentals. Let's start with the geopolitics. Geopolitics actually is a mindset and also a behavior. What's driving actually that kind of behavior mindset is security or sense of insecurity. So the way it looks at the world basically is a piece of pie on the table, and it just wants to take as much as possible and leave as little or nothing actually to others. So in order to gain the sense of security, dominating, I am the one, as reflected by the Biden administration's foreign policy towards China, using words or positioning like China is a rivalry, is an adversary. If you look at the U.S. domestic politics, any agenda actually the Biden administration wants to advance. So China, demonizing China has to be a big part of this puzzle there. The reality is there is a pie. This pie is around our neck. It's called the planetary boundary, meaning actually human species together collectively we're living in crisis. So this is a moment of survival or accelerated extinction moment actually for human species on this planet Earth there. So with the IPCC report, the scientists are giving us this code red situation, not only today, but also looking into the future. So what's required actually is biospheric consciousness, or I call like biosphere politics. So it requires this collectiveness and togetherness of the human species on this planet. Doesn't matter you're rich or poor, or color of your skins or religions, whatever, or political systems there. We just need to figure out how to work together in order to really tackle climate change crisis there. So in that context, if you look at the Biden administration's policy, still stuck in this sort of geopolitics situation that's already out. So oasis or whatever imagined sort of scenario or ideal situation is not just fooling ourselves and fooling the rest of the world. That doesn't really help the global agenda or the global advancement to fight climate change at all.
Yeah, there are really important issues at stake. Thomas, what do you think? Do you think this climate change cooperation will be, the oasis of calm?
I think that this can be an opportunity to start to get back on a good footing between China and the United States. There have been severe problems on both sides. Both the United States and China have made major miscalculations on their geopolitical policies over the last few years. Obviously, President Trump, I think, was a disaster in his handling of foreign affairs and some of the tariff wars that went on. So I think we have an opportunity to improve on that, and I think that climate change, everyone agrees, is critical right now. So I believe that it can be an opportunity to find a path for cooperation on that, which then I hope would not be an oasis, but would lead to cooperation on multiple levels so that we can get back to a normalization of relationships, which we really have. I mean, I've lived in China for 6 years. I see the Chinese people and American people are very similar in their thoughts and desires. It's our politicians that are really creating the problems now.
Yeah, unfortunately, that is the case. That has been the case since 2018, as many would argue. Madam Wu, let me go to you. This is John Kerry's second visit to China in less than 5 months. In April, he and Changhua, which is China's representative for climate talks, met in Shanghai and issued a joint statement. And the statement said both countries intend to develop long-term strategies aimed at net zero carbon emissions by the climate conference, COP26 time. And also that will take place in Glasgow, of course. How do you see both countries working towards this goal?
Well, on the positive side, I think at least the two countries decided to leave some space, the window, actually our channel, to communicate with each other, to exchange ideas and thoughts, right? Particularly looking into the future, there seems to be some space and a possibility left on the table in that space at this moment. But if you look at the substance, if you look at the joint statement, announced back in April, I call that politically correct narrative, where, using all the languages and the words and phrases that's pretty much aligned with what's needed, actually. And also, it's pretty much sort of restating what's happening now on both sides in terms of domestic actions, targets, or endeavors there already. It's really the collaboration part is the problem, because there's no substance actually really happening between the two countries at this moment. Climate change is no longer just a talking, right? We understand the urgency, this is a crisis, we need to come together, take on our responsibilities, but it's more about R&D, investment in R&D, collaboration, about technology innovation, about how to build up industrial supply chains, using all the materials that's needed actually in order to drive this clean energy revolution, which is so urgently needed at this moment. Rather on the side, actually, beyond this statement, we started to see conflicts or contradictions, rivalries around the trade, around the supply chains. So China, in reality, continues to be positioned as a national security threat to the U.S. That's pretty much endangers all the things we're talking about here today. So what's already happening is that there is a window for potential future collaboration, but on substance, it's almost zero.
Thomas, what do you think? I mean, John Kerry made no secret about his passion for, the issue of climate change. What do you think his two visits, which happened in a very short time span, indicate?
I think that alone speaks volumes. I mean, I think that the United States has definitely changed their policy. To have our senior environmental person travel to China twice in less than a 6-month period is miraculous. And so I think the United States should be given a lot of credit for reaching out. I think it's China's opportunity too to accept that hand that's extended across the water, because that's the only way we're going to solve some of these problems that are here. Ms. Wu is exactly right that we can have cooperative agreements on R&D and development of many, many different clean technology areas, which we haven't yet. But we've got to remember too that the United States had addressed the issue some time ago when they peaked their carbon emissions in 2007. China isn't planning on peaking their carbon emissions until 2030. So there's a lot of additional carbon that's going to be added to the atmosphere just in our next 9 years. So I think that is incumbent for China to try to find a way to resolve that and not create the demand for the electricity that the coal-burning plants are bringing to it. China is bringing online as much coal generating capacity as the United States has in the entire United States in this next 9 years. So I think that is an excellent place to try to look at how do we stop that? How do we have China peak their carbon emission in the next 3 years and not the next 8 years?
Yeah, Madam Wu, do you think John Kerry's hands will be tied by the legacy of the Trump administration? For example, both countries said they wanted to take appropriate actions to maximize international investment and finance, to support a low-carbon economy. But at the same time, the U.S. continues to impose the Trump-era tariffs on Chinese solar panels, for example. How do you look at that situation?
Well, theoretically, we should be just stuck, in the old days, even though it's just before last year, actually, the former administrations there. I think the world is faster changing, and the world is moving on very, very fast. The point you just mentioned is very interesting. I think, not only, Chinese industry or companies recognize that this is sort of a dilemma or barriers, actually, for advancing more aggressively actions to address carbon issues. But also the American industries, are also running out of patience. Just this week, actually, different industrial organizations started to sending letters to the White House, to the U.S. Trade Representative Office, basically complaining, say, hey, what's the clarity, right? For this new administration in terms of, trade with China, the tariffs, stuff like that. Because whatever happened actually during the Trump administration has already expired. Now, 7 months into the new administration, there is still no, clarity around what's going to happen bilaterally on the trade issues there. So I think industries are running out of patience and is pushing the government actually to take immediate actions. I think this is an opportunity. I do echo what Thomas said earlier. Yeah, there is always this positive side or sides of hope that somehow, particularly from a trade perspective, tariff perspective, there is an opportunity for the Biden administration to work closely with the Chinese government and trying to figure out, if not a totally win-win, but at least actually a more optimized sort of a trade policy around the tariffs actually between the two countries, rather than being stuck in the situation, blaming each other around emission issues.
Yeah, Thomas, take the electric vehicle industry, for example. China is leading this industry by the numbers of 2020. It accounted for 44% of all the electric vehicles in the world, and the U.S. represents about 17%. Do you see electronic cars as helping to meet the climate goals of both countries, or could that actually trigger another round of rivalry between these two countries?
Yeah, I think the electric car industry is long overdue. I mean, particularly when you look back, and in 1910, I just saw a map the other day of electrical charging stations all over Chicago. There were probably 300 charging stations. So we had electrical vehicles. Henry Ford drove an electric vehicle, and then the petroleum industry killed that industry off, and now it's coming back. And I'm very glad to see, and I think China's doing a wonderful job on that. I have several friends who are in that sector. I think that it could potentially create some trade war on that, some bias against it. The United States, I think, has not always been fair to China on their automobiles. I'd worked with Brilliant Auto before, and they were trying to get vehicles imported into the United States, and there's just such a strong hold by the auto industry on that it was nearly impossible to get the vehicles approved. So I hope, because of China's really advanced technology in electric vehicles, that there will not be a barrier on it. And the same with solar panels. I believe China makes the best solar panels in the world because they have the best sand. They have the best silica to be able to do that. So if we can get those things together so the green industry can prosper around the world.
Exactly.
Again, the United States does not want to have unfair trade where the government has helped those industries get ahead. And so it's a non-competitive market. But I think if we can keep a competitive market, then we can keep the tariffs off and have enhanced trade both directions.
All right. Thanks so much, Thomas and Madame Wu. Thank you both for your insight.